After 22 years of turning wrenches on pickups, I've seen truck owners blow money on fuel like it grows on trees. I'm not exaggerating. I've watched guys spend $3, $4, $500 extra every year because nobody ever told them what I'm about to tell you. Things that any mechanic knows, things we do on our own rigs without being asked, things that don't cost much but save a lot. 15 habits that will cut your fuel bill and keep your truck running right. Dealers won't mention any of it because if you knew, you wouldn't need them. Let's fix that. If you're new here, my name is Wade Tucker. I spent over 2 decades as a diesel mechanic, and I've worked on more pickups than I can count. I started making videos because the information you need about trucks is hidden behind salesmen and service departments. Not anymore. Hit subscribe and let's get into it. All right, let's talk about fuel economy. Not the theoretical kind you see on the window sticker, the real kind. The kind that shows up on your credit card statement every 2 weeks. First trick, tire pressure. This one seems small and it's the one guys ignore most. Your truck came with a door jamb sticker that says the maximum tire pressure. Most people see that number and think that's the danger zone. They keep it 10, 15 pounds below max and drive around on soft sidewalls thinking they're being gentle on their tires. Here's what actually happens. Underinflated tires have more rolling resistance. More rolling resistance means your engine works harder to move the same weight at the same speed. On a pickup truck with a full tank and a load, you're looking at a 3 to 5% fuel penalty. Every single tank. Now, I'm not saying you inflate to the number on the tire itself because that sidewall rating is the absolute maximum, not the optimum. Check your door jamb. That's where Ford, Chevy, Dodge, and Toyota put the right number for your specific truck. It usually runs 5 to 10 psi below the tire's maximum rating. Put it there. Check it once a month with a good gauge, not the one at the air pump that's been run over 100 times and reads 10 pounds off. A decent pencil-style gauge costs $8 and will save you more than it costs over any given year. Second thing, your air filter. I've pulled air filters out of trucks with 100,000 miles that look like they'd been used as a furnace filter. Plugged up, dark with dirt, the paper element swollen and restrictive. A choked air filter forces your engine to work like you're breathing through a straw. The engine compensates it by dumping more fuel to make up for the lack of air. You lose 5–8% fuel economy just from a dirty air filter, and most guys won't touch it until the check engine light comes on. 15,000 miles, you pull that filter, hold it up to the light, and if you can't see light through it clearly, you replace it. 10 minutes work. $15 part. This is one of the highest ROI maintenance items in any pickup, and nobody tells you about it because it doesn't require a shop visit. Third, spark plugs. Now here's where I get specific because the dealer will tell you to change plugs at a certain mileage and leave it at that. That's not the full picture. The real question isn't just how many miles are on the plugs, it's what condition are they in. I pull plugs on trucks all the time at 60,000 miles that look perfect, and I find plugs at 30,000 that are fouled from short trips where the engine never fully heats up to burn off the deposits. If you do a lot of short drives under 10 miles, your plugs accumulate deposits faster because the engine doesn't run hot enough to self-clean. Watch for misfires, rough idle, or hard starting. Those are your plugs telling you they're done, regardless of what the maintenance schedule says. And when you do replace them, use the correct plug for your engine. Don't go cheap on plugs. The difference between a $5 plug and a $12 plug in a V8 is measurable in fuel economy and throttle response. Do it right. Fourth, your oxygen sensors. These are the little devices in your exhaust that tell your engine how much fuel to run. 2 per bank on most V8 trucks. 1 per bank on 4 cylinders and some 6-cylinder engines. After 100,000 miles, these sensors start to drift. They send incorrect data to the engine computer, and your engine runs either too rich or too lean. Either way costs you fuel. A bad O2 sensor can drop your fuel economy by 15%, and you won't necessarily get a check engine light because most sensors drift slowly enough that the computer compensates part of it. If your truck is eating more fuel than it used to and the plugs and air filter are fine, your O2 sensors are the next thing to check. The rear sensor on each bank is the one that usually fails first, and you can test it with a multimeter if you know what you're doing, or a shop can do it in 20 minutes. Don't ignore these. On a truck with a small V6, a bad sensor can cost you 2–3 miles per gallon. On a V8 with a heavy foot, you might not even notice the difference until you've spent an extra $200 on fuel you didn't need to spend. Fifth, fuel injectors. Every 30,000 miles, put a bottle of good fuel system cleaner through a full tank. I'm not talking about the cheap $2 bottles. I'm talking about the ones with PEA solvent, the stuff that actually cleans deposits off the pintle in the housing. Fuel injectors get varnish buildup from ethanol fuel and from just sitting with fuel in them over winter. A dirty injector doesn't spray the right pattern. It dribbles fuel instead of atomizing it. That means you get less power per gallon, and your engine compensates by using more fuel to make the same horsepower. I do this every oil change on my own trucks and on every truck I work on that comes through my bay. It's cheap insurance. There's also the walnut shell cleaning method, where a shop blasts cleaned walnut media through your injectors on a bench tester. That's more thorough than the bottle method, but it requires removing the injectors, and it's not something you do every year. Once at 100,000 miles is fine if you're doing the bottle method in between. Sixth, coasting in gear versus neutral. This one I see people get wrong constantly, and it costs them more than they realize. When you see a red light ahead or need to slow down, you take the truck out of gear and coast. Feels natural. Feels like you're saving fuel. You're not. Here's why. When your engine is still in gear and your wheels are turning, the momentum of the truck keeps the engine turning through the drivetrain. The engine uses almost no fuel in this state because the intake throttle is closed, and the computer cuts injectors almost entirely. When you shift to neutral, the engine has to idle, and an idling engine uses fuel, often more than the injection cut when you're in gear. Even at steady highway speed, when you're in gear and you let off the throttle, the engine cuts fuel completely for a moment until it starts to slow, then it resumes on the overrun. When you're in neutral, the engine never enters that fuel cut state because it's mechanically disconnected from the wheels. So if you're cruising at 60 and you drop to neutral to coast downhill, you're using fuel. If you stay in gear, the engine uses almost none. Now there are exceptions. If you're in stop-and-go traffic and you're coming to a complete stop, neutral is better because holding the clutch and staying in gear at very low speed can cause drivetrain snatch. But on the highway, whenever you need to slow down, drop a gear and let the engine do the braking. You'll save fuel, and you'll also be safer because engine braking keeps your wheels connected to the drivetrain, which means you have more control in a slide or emergency. Seventh, AC strategy. This one's simple if you know the physics. At low speeds, under 45 miles per hour, open windows are more efficient than running the AC. At those speeds, the aerodynamic drag from open windows is less than the fuel cost of running the compressor. But above 55, the math flips. At highway speeds, the aerodynamic penalty of open windows outweighs the fuel usage of the AC compressor. The compressor on a modern pickup truck costs you about half a mile per gallon when it's running. Open windows at 70 cost you more than that in aerodynamic drag. So here's the rule I follow. Around town, windows down, AC off. Highway, windows up, AC on set to the temperature you want, and forget about it. If you're in a full-size crew cab like an F-150 King Ranch or a Suburban with the rear AC unit running, that's an even bigger draw. Consider a separate strategy for the rear unit if you don't need it. Cut the blower fan to the rear only when you have passengers and run front AC at a moderate level. Every watt the alternator draws is fuel the engine has to make. Eighth, warm-up. This one matters more in winter, but it applies year-round. Do not idle your truck for 5 minutes before you drive it. I know the old thinking says you need to let it warm up, and in the age of carburetors that was somewhat true. But modern fuel-injected engines do not need to idle to warm up. What they need is to get to operating temperature quickly. Idling a cold engine for 5 minutes does two things that hurt you. First, it washes unburned fuel past the piston rings and dilutes your oil. This happens every cold idle and it accumulates. Second, it keeps the engine cold, which means the computer runs richer than necessary for longer. The best thing to do is start the truck, let it idle for 30 seconds until the oil pressure comes up, then drive gently for the first mile or two. Low RPM, light throttle, let the engine warm up under load instead of sitting still. You'll warm the engine faster, you'll use less fuel during warm-up, and you'll reduce fuel dilution in your oil. In winter, a block heater is worth considering if you park outside and you want to reduce warm-up time. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Ninth, roof racks. I see these on trucks every day and the owner has forgotten they're up there. A roof rack, any roof rack, adds frontal area and disrupts airflow. Even an empty, unladen rack adds 3 to 5% aerodynamic drag at highway speed. If you use it once a month to haul something, fine, keep it on. But if you're the guy with a Thule rack bolted to your cab that's been empty since you moved that dresser 2 years ago, take it off. Store it in the garage and put it on when you need it. That empty rack is costing you fuel every single drive, every single tank, and you're not even thinking about it. I removed the roof rack from my own truck after calculating that I used it maybe 4 times a year, and it was costing me roughly a mile per gallon on the highway. That's significant over the course of a year. 10th, tonneau covers. If you have a pickup truck and you don't have some kind of cover on your bed, you're leaving fuel economy on the table. An open bed at highway speed creates a massive low pressure zone at the tailgate. Air flows in, swirls around in the bed, and creates drag. This is not minor. On a full-size half-ton at 70 miles per hour, an open bed accounts for roughly 3 to 5% of total aerodynamic drag. A cheap soft roll-up cover or a hard fiberglass lid eliminates most of that. I recommend a hard folding cover if you can afford it. They seal better, they look better, and they pay for themselves in fuel savings within 2 years at current gas prices. I've had customers tell me they gained a full mile per gallon after installing a good cover. On a truck that gets 15 miles per gallon, that's roughly a 7% improvement. That's real money. The cheap vinyl tarp style covers work too, but they wear out faster and don't insulate the bed as well in hot or cold weather. 11th, weight reduction. I want you to go out to your truck right now and check your bed. I guarantee you there's something in there you don't need. A toolbox you haven't opened in 6 months. A set of chains you used once in a snowstorm 3 winters ago. Concrete blocks, old lumber, your kids' toys, bricks, a spare fuel can that's been sitting there empty or full since last camping trip. That weight adds up. Every 100 pounds in your truck reduces fuel economy by about 1%. Not a huge number, but over the course of a year, 20,000 miles, it adds up. I've had customers who were complaining about fuel economy on trucks that were getting worse mileage than they should. We put the truck on a scale. 400 pounds of junk in the bed. They removed it and their mileage came back. Check your bed. Check your underseat storage. Check your roof rack. Remove what you don't need and keep it that way. 12th, highway cruise control. If you're driving a long stretch of flat road, use your cruise control and use it properly. Cruise control systems are calibrated to maintain your set speed using the least throttle input necessary. When you're manually controlling the throttle, you tend to vary your input more than necessary. You accelerate a little too fast coming out of a hill, then you lift off going into it. That constant variance costs fuel. On flat roads, set cruise at the speed limit or 1 mile per hour below and let the system do the work. The computer responds faster and more precisely than your right foot does. On rolling terrain, a good adaptive cruise control system will anticipate hills and back off the throttle before you crest, saving more fuel than a human will by feel. If your truck has adaptive cruise, use it on the highway. It's worth every penny of whatever you paid for it. 13th, premium fuel. I'll keep this one short because it needs to be simple. Only use premium fuel when your engine requires it. Most pickup trucks are designed for regular unleaded. The manufacturer specifies it on the fuel door or in the owner's manual. Running premium in an engine that doesn't require it is a waste of money. You're not getting extra power, you're not cleaning the engine better, you're just paying more for the same result. However, if your engine specifically calls for premium, do not substitute. NOx sensors and octane requirements exist for a reason, and running lower octane in a high compression or turbocharged engine will cause knock, which will damage components over time and actually reduce your fuel economy. Know what your truck requires and follow that specification. Nothing more, nothing less. 14th, block heater in cold weather. If you live somewhere where winter temperatures regularly drop below 20 degrees Fahrenheit and you park your truck outside, a block heater is one of the best investments you can make for fuel economy and engine longevity. A block heater warms the engine coolant, which warms the oil, which warms the block. When you start a cold engine in 20-degree weather, you're running a rich mixture for the first several minutes while the O2 sensors and catalytic converter come up to temperature. That rich mixture gets past the piston rings and into your oil. Over time, fuel dilution thins your oil and reduces protection. A block heater eliminates most of that cold start enrichment period. You'll use less fuel during warm-up, you'll reduce engine wear, and your cabin will heat up faster. A simple timer set to 2 hours before your departure time will warm the engine enough that you start with oil that flows properly and a coolant temperature near operating range. I recommend the magnetic block heater that attaches to the oil pan if your truck has a steel oil pan, or the coolant heater style that replaces a freeze plug on the block. Both work. The timer is the key part. You don't need to run it all night. 2 hours is plenty. 15th. Route planning and stop-and-go avoidance. This is less about your truck and more about your habits, but it matters. Every time you have to brake from speed and then accelerate again, you're wasting energy. Highway fuel economy is all about momentum. If you know there's a light ahead that's going to turn red, lift off the throttle early and let the engine braking slow you down. You might not need to brake at all by the time the light changes, and if it turns green, you just accelerate again without having to restart from zero. This takes a little awareness, and it's not always possible, but on routes you drive regularly, learn the timing of the lights. Use an app to check traffic before you leave. If you have 2 routes to work and one always has construction and stops, take the other one even if it's slightly longer in miles. 5 extra miles at steady highway speed cost less fuel than 20 minutes of stop and go. And if you're in a neighborhood where you make multiple short trips, combine them. One trip to the store, the post office, and the hardware store uses less fuel than 3 separate trips because your engine is already warm and your stop-start pattern is minimized. Now, why don't dealers mention any of this? Let's be honest about it. Because if you save money on fuel, you have more money for other things, and other things sometimes involve their service departments. But also because the real answer is uncomfortable. The real answer is that fuel economy depends mostly on maintenance and driving habits, and a well-maintained truck driven by someone who understands how the engine works will use 20 to 30% less fuel than the same truck owned by someone who doesn't maintain it and doesn't drive efficiently. That's not a criticism of truck owners. That's a criticism of a system that doesn't teach people how their trucks work and then charges them for the results. I started making these videos because the information should be free and it should be honest. You're paying for the gas. You might as well get the most miles per gallon you can out of every tank. All right, before you go, I want to know what you're already doing. Which of these 15 tricks are you already using on your truck? Drop it in the comments. I'm especially curious about the ones that surprised you, the ones you didn't know about. Let's get some good conversation going in there. And if you found this useful, subscribe. I've got more videos coming on keeping your truck running right, on things dealers won't tell you, on the kind of maintenance that actually matters versus the kind they're trying to sell you. See you in the next one.